Well, happy Thanksgiving, Dan. That's the thing you have to say starting this day, the Monday before Thanksgiving. Now, every greeting with someone is, hey, have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
I've already run into a few people this morning.
whether you want to
And
or not.
boy, yeah, just a lot of demanding, a lot of telling people what to do, a lot of have a good this, have a good that, have a great day.
What if I don't want to?
Yeah, I have a friend that used to say at grocery stores, someone would say, well, have a great day, and he's like, great, now I need to add that to my list.
Too much pressure, you know?
It's only November 21st, but that means on this calendar date of 2022 that we're 3 days before Thanksgiving. And that for a lot of people is the greatest day of the year. My dad, Thanksgiving was his favorite holiday.
Really?
He wasn't a religious man. Yeah, he wasn't a religious man. And I didn't think a lot of the government or war. So there weren't a lot of other, holidays you could really be excited about. But Thanksgiving, boy, that was a doozy. That one was just, religion free. You don't have to be singing war narratives or anything like you do on the 4th of July or, Memorial Day or any of those other ones. And so Thanksgiving was a big deal. How about you? Are you a big Thanksgiving family?
Yeah, we really love it. For a while now, we do Christmas up in Michigan and we do Thanksgiving down in Kentucky. That's where my wife's family is from. And so we do that kind of trading off of holidays.
What do they eat in Kentucky for Thanksgiving? Is it traditional turkey kind of thing?
The most delicious food. Yeah, I just gorge myself on that Southern cooking.
Wow. Like chitlins and things like that?
Well, you got your dressing, which is different than stuffing. And
wait a second. What do you mean dressing is different than stuffing?
There's magic in it, Southern magic. I don't know. Well, for starters, you don't stuff it in the bird. You cook it separately. And, I think it's slightly different ingredients, but vastly superior. Yeah.
Really? Dressing is different? I just thought those were...
you thought they were interchangeable, yeah. But
I thought it was just extra stuffing that couldn't go inside the bird. Giblets, Ray says. Giblets.
Yeah, if you want to chime in the comments with your favorite Thanksgiving side dish or main dish. I'm not a huge turkey guy. It's like kind of an overrated meat in general, but...
It is. It's the meat that I have at Subway. I think this is the problem. Like everybody has their sub sandwiches, as we found on the tour because we ate a lot of Subway sandwiches at truck stops. Yeah. And because I get turkey there, the whole turkey experience to me feels like a fast food sandwich meat.
Yeah, like this is a shelf stable truck stop food. Like I saw one thing. It was like turkeys taste like they never drank water once in their life before they turned it into meat.
Now, I will say, I lived in Texas for a few years outside of Dallas as an adult. And there, the custom was, at least in our little neighborhood, was to deep fry a turkey. So people had deep fryers out in their driveway. Mm-hmm. And then they would put this turkey into a giant deep fryer. And that stayed awfully moist.
Yeah, I've heard
the
that's
outside
really good.
Got real crunchy, and man, that felt like a whole other kind of because it wasn't like like fried chicken where you take the pieces apart and roll it in bread and then deep fry it.
Right.
I don't know, like the whole bird I think goes in there.
Yeah.
I think that's what they.
And half the time it overflows and lights everything on fire, and you see the videos. Have you not seen these videos? Like people try to deep fry a turkey, and obviously it displaces a lot of the oil. They miscalculate, and so you drop it in, hot oil all over the flames, and it just is like a fireball. Like,
no, I didn't see that. Okay.
Well, on Friday you'll see a new batch. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, we're going to talk today about a little holiday advice, not so much the food and dressings and alternative meats, but how do you interact with your family members and loved ones and friends, chosen or obligatory families. And how do you engage with people around the holiday times? Dan, I thought you had a nice little anecdote when we were talking about this, that your wife had said to you, you do know that your family members can read your Facebook posts or listen to your, probably not listening to the podcast. That's
they're
a lot
probably
of,
not deep into the
commitment.
podcast, but
so, it comes up, right? And for a lot of people, Thanksgiving time, especially, even compared to the other holidays, for whatever reason, maybe it's the proximity to elections, or maybe it's just the nature of what else is there to do at Thanksgiving than maybe watch people play sports games or talk about stuff like, hey, how's it going? And the last 6, 7 years, a lot of people have said, like, man, I don't even know how to engage with my family members or um, answer the question, how's it going? Because it has felt like civic life and civil society and politics have just become something totally different. And so people haven't known how to deal with it. And a couple of years ago, we put together a little advice that we're going to revisit today, because as it turns out, this was actually pretty good advice for all this. So back in 2019, we wrote an article, put it out. I can't remember where it got on some media broadcast things. A little family holiday advice. And so we're gonna chat about that today. Just sort of get people in the mental space. Actually looking at it again, I thought this is pretty good advice. I started resharing pieces of it because I think it might actually be quite helpful. So in the comments, if you're into something, thinking about this with your own family, we'd love to hear about it. And of course, if you have any comments or questions of your own about how you think or wonder how it could go for holiday time, let us know.
Yeah. And Ray says, remember, for many families that may be getting together, they may be getting together again for the first time since COVID. It's a good point. The last couple of years have been real weird,
That is a great point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about this, Ray. Good point. We wrote this in 2019, going into the 2019 holiday season. And then, there wasn't one the next year for a lot of people.
4 months later, yeah.
Wow, yeah. We tended to still do, I don't know how, well, I don't know. We just did holiday things. The last 5 years, my wife and I have not been around our normal family life at Thanksgiving. We've been vacationing in Mexico. And this year we're doing that again, but we're going to go days after Thanksgiving instead of over Thanksgiving. So we've been able to skip Thanksgiving. So a good reminder, Ray. Of people that haven't been, maybe it may have been a while. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the frame for this advice. Well, let me start with the final paragraph of this piece of advice that we have. Now, we have this on the Vote Common Good website. You can go into our blog over there. You can see it on our social media. You'll probably find it in the links to this, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's on video or if you're just listening to the podcast version in the show notes. The concluding paragraph of this, I think, was maybe 2 paragraphs. I think is really the frame for all of this. So let's start there. I'll just read this to you. Whether you choose the eggshells or bombshells approach, we'll get to this in a minute. That's kind of 2 approaches you can take: walking carefully on eggshells or getting into it, which I refer to as bombshells. Remember that, quote, it's not all about the turkey. In this case, it's Thanksgiving, so be thankful. As hard as it might be to see another person's ideas as a gift for you, know that it is a gift for you. This is your chance to gain a firsthand knowledge and experience with ideas that are different from your own. So be generous when you're hearing other people's ideas. Remember that for most of us, we're not policy experts, and many of us know what we believe, but not always the reasons for those beliefs. Use each moment as a gift. Today is not a day only for arguments. Today is Thanksgiving, a day that we can understand each other more. And remember, we wrote this back in 2019, that November 3rd, 2020 is the day you can actually do something about it. You're not going to do something about it, at Thanksgiving time. So I feel like that's some pretty good general advice, right? Is that look, be generous, and realize that we all hold beliefs that we don't really know why we believe them. And you can get into an awful lot of conversations with people where you pressure them into justifying why they hold a belief that they hold. And a lot of us can't go very much further than, a few sentences to describe our belief without just repeating ourselves and not feeling like we have to explain ourselves to somebody else. So just know that that's just the reality for most people, is that when someone is grilling you hard on, well, what about this and what about that and how can you think this, those are quite difficult questions for someone to engage with and for someone to answer.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the frame. First off, decide for this holiday season, hey, are you going to go with the walk on eggshells approach, being careful, not talking about civic issues, social issues, political issues, or are you going to be willing to drop a few bombshells and say, let's get into it, let's have at it? And we make a couple of suggestions here, all using the kind of fun of Thanksgiving food metaphors, right? So one is to know your food sensitivities and allergies. Look, it's totally appropriate if you're like, look, I don't want to get into this at Christmas. I'm going to do the walking on eggshells approach, or at Thanksgiving. I don't want to talk about all this. I don't want to talk about these issues with you people. This is just not something I want to engage in. If that's your approach and you're like, look, I have a particular food allergy, like for the people that choose not to eat meat, and then when the turkey comes by, they just say, no, thank you. Or the person who's gluten intolerant, and when the dressing comes by, they say, how was that made? No, thank you. You sometimes just have to let it pass, right? And if you have a food sensitivity, food allergy, or a chosen preference of what you will and won't eat, you come up with ways to talk about that, right? You come up with ways to say, no, thanks. I choose not to enjoy cranberries. So the cranberry sauce, you can just let that slide by. The amount of water that it takes to grow cranberries, I just in good conscience can't eat them.
It's a moral stand.
It's a moral stand, like tomatoes and avocados. I don't know if anybody can't eat cranberries. So that feels like a safe one.
But yeah, I think it's important to say, like, you can set boundaries for yourself at family gatherings and say, no, I'm not going to engage in these conversations, because maybe from experience where it leads to. It's not going to lead to anybody changing their mind. It's not going to lead to mutual understanding. And so, yeah, say you're not going to do it. That's okay.
Yeah, and have a practiced phrase can go a long way. So you kind of build your confidence and just know what you're going to say, so that you're not feeling an emotional response and then having to craft a well-worded reply.
Yeah.
Right? That's what gets difficult for some people. They hear a family member or someone say something, and it just starts an emotional movement. And next thing they know, they're wanting to talk and they don't know what to say. So we make a suggestion in this article, and I think I borrowed this from a friend who we're taking up some advice a few years ago when we put this piece together, asking people how they respond. And I think this is a great phrase to say something like, hey, what you just said right there, that's really hard for me to hear, and I don't agree with it. And while I don't want to use up our family time to talk about this issue right now, I do want you to know that I don't share your same thoughts on this, but we can talk about it later, or I don't want to talk about it. Because for some people, what they feel is that they have a moral or a ethical responsibility to reply to something that they hear, if it's, especially to them, if it feels misogynistic or hateful or is harmful to some people, or is the kind of thing that really bothered them when they were younger, and they don't want to just let it lie, but they also don't want to get into it. Right. So having something like, hey, this is hard for me to hear. I don't want to talk about it, but I just want you to know, like, that's not how I think about it. And my silence right now is not being complicit with your statement. Something like that kind of gives you some sense of boundaries, but also stating your claim.
Yeah.
And knowing where you are. And look, another little piece of advice, just know if you're talking with a family member who just likes to razz people and rile people up.
Right.
That person they're in most families have somebody like that. And so if someone's just working this thing, then you come up with another version of that. Like, look, hey, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think the important thing is just don't take the bait in those scenarios. Like, they're not reaching out in good faith to have a fun discussion. They're trying to get you mad.
Yes, and that's right.
Just don't take the bait. Just, that's not what I think, but let's talk about that some other time that's not Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so our next little piece of advice there, right, is like check your food allergies and sensitivities, or your thought allergies and sensitivities, or there's some things you don't want to talk about. This next little piece is expect some lumps in the gravy, right? Not everything's going to go perfect. It's not all going to turn out just right. There's going to be statements and comments that are made that make people feel uncomfortable, and that someone didn't even intend to mean in a particular way, but it's easy for you to understand that in a way that seemed harmful to you. And if you can find a way to respond with some kindness and grace, that can go a long way. So one of the ways to do that is to say something like, hey, look, on Helen, thanks for having the courage to say what you think about that. But, I don't agree with you, but I know that it means a lot to you. And I appreciate knowing that it means a lot to you. Right. That's a little bit more graceful version than, hey, I'm stopping this right now. Right. Is to just say, hey, I don't agree, but I realize that seems like something really, really meaningful to you. So thanks for sharing it. But that's it. That puts a stop to it. That's another version of just how to respond to something so you don't feel like you're just sitting there seething. And look, I know there's some people who just family dynamics overall, somehow they get back in with their extended family or something, and all these old patterns from childhood or, adolescence start kicking back in, and everyone slides into their old roles and their old ways of acting and behaving. Well, having some prepared statements that can be really generous and knowing that things really matter to someone. Now, this is all under the category of walking on eggshells, right? Like, you don't want to talk about it. So you're intentionally trying to create a safe context where you feel like you're empowered and don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I just don't want to sit next to them. Or if they start talking, I'm just going to walk out of the room. Something that helps you feel a little more secure, but also not feeling like it's just running roughshod over the top of your own convictions and morals, or as Ray says, try to prevent the eye rolling and all that. All right. The third piece of advice here if you want to walk on eggshells for this and just be careful, is to don't talk with your mouth full. And what we're getting at here is, if you have a whole lot to say about this person's view, don't say it all while your mouth is just ready to go. Right. Like, give yourself a little minute. And I'm going to give a little piece of what might seem like counterintuitive advice. It's a great way for things to come to an end. If someone wants to start talking about something, say they want to talk about Hunter Biden, or they want to talk about border wall, or they want to talk about Ron DeSantis, or they want to talk about the 2020 election being unfair to the failed twice soon to be third three want to be third three-time impeached. Yeah, three-time impeached. Yeah, he's just trying to be all Michael Jordan about this. So if there's someone wants to bring that up, this can sound a little counterintuitive, but it works pretty well. And that's to use the say more about that approach, right? So the first approach was, hey, I don't want to talk about this, and I don't agree with you, and I'm going to leave it right there. The other is, thanks for sharing. That seemed really important to you. I'm not interested in hearing anymore, but I want to value that this was important to you. The third is, say more about that, because what you will find for most people, a genuine invitation to say more doesn't last very long. Most of us, the things that we believe, we've got a couple of sentences around those. So someone says, oh, I just really think, there's just hordes of people coming over the border and we really have to secure the border. And you're like, hey, actually, no, because I paid attention to some things. There's not hordes of people coming over the border, and we really need to change our government policies to allow a more efficient and law-abiding way for people to enter the country. Just like we could all do if our family decided to go to Mexico. We could all just go because there's a process for us to get in, and it's quite straightforward. But people coming the other way, it's not made that way. So that's where the problem. So instead of that argument, just to say to someone, oh yeah, say more about this. Well, I think, there's just millions of people coming over the border. Oh, say more about that. Well, I saw it on, it kind of brings an end to it, right? The person has said their thing. That's it. You've invited them to say more. And shockingly, most people are like, that's it. That's what they got, right? If they have more to say about it, it might actually be interesting. But very often the kind of one-off statements, or like we talked about last week, well, I heard these kids are, using litter boxes in school because they don't even have human gender as one of the things anymore. And you're like, oh yeah, say more about that. Like, what schools do you think that was in?
Yeah.
Well, there aren't any, right? Right. So all of this is sort of how do you walk on eggshells, kind of get out of there without a whole lot of conflict, but it allows you to say something. Clear boundary. I don't agree with what you just said. I'm interested in hearing more. Thank you, Uncle Bill. Hey, Aunt Helen, I know this means a lot to you, and I appreciate the fact that you shared that. Or, hey, Kevin, say a little more about that. And anything you didn't hear from Joe Rogan, you got anything else, or is this just all Joe Rogan? Where did you, just a little bit of inquiry about where it came from, right? So I think that those are the better approaches than plotting out where you're going to sit, deciding how you're going to walk out of the room, trying to manage your breathing and eye rolling in a way that is sending nonverbal communication. Sometimes having a really strong verbal piece. But
I'm
also
just always ready to get more pie is my answer to it. You know what? I'm going to get more pie.
That's a great follow-up to all of these. On Helen, I really don't. That's not how I see it at all, but it really seems like it matters to you. Like, thanks for that. And by the way, would you like some more pie?
Yeah.
If you can end with, I'm going to get more, or would you care for some pie? No one could
be mad if you offer to bring them pie. So
would you like some ice cream? That would be the good thing. So I think those are, and just frankly, just general experiences of hearing people say things that you don't agree with and you don't want to engage. You don't want to get into it with them. You don't want that to be your thing. And the other piece of advice we probably should have said first was, like, check in with the host or with the family and say, like, hey, what are we doing? Are we talking about this stuff or are we not talking about this stuff? Right. Like, just kind of know where you're at here. And some families won't even go that far, right? They'll just want it to be non-engagement, right. And hope no one brings it up. So sometimes it's not a bad idea. And that we'll get a couple pieces of advice here in the second bit. All right. Anything on the chat there we should look at? Okay. So the dropping bombshells. So rather than walking on eggshells.
Yeah. What if you want to drop some bombs?
What if you really do want to talk about it? What if you're like, oh, no. I'm not walking into Thanksgiving dinner as if someone else has got something to say. I got something to say because, Jane over there, she doesn't listen to anybody else. And this is my one shot because I saw what she wrote on Instagram and I got a little message. I got a little message for her. So again, nothing wrong with that. If you're in the kind of family that wants to share things, and you feel like, hey, this is the one time that we have together, where we can say these kinds of things. So it can be a great gift to share what matters to you and why. So I've got a couple of pieces of advice. One of those is last and first. You could say something like, hey, here's why I want to bring this up. If you're somebody who wants to bring it up, this is our last Thanksgiving before such and such. Like, this really matters. Like, hey, we got this thing going on. I really want to talk about Herschel Walker, why I think he's not competent to be a senator in the United States of America. And this is our last chance to talk about it before that election. Or, whatever, if there's some timing reason where you can give some rationale for why you're bringing it up, or this is the first time we've had a chance to talk about this since COVID, and we haven't really been together since then. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of things, and I've changed a lot about in the way I think about some of these issues, and I'd like to share some of those with you. Maybe you've been newly awakened to some ideas and you're like, hey, I saw this documentary and it really helped me think differently about some of these ideas. And I'd like to share those. I'd like to share a few of those with you. Like, come up with some rationale that is honest about why you're bringing this up right now, right? As opposed to, why do you always want to ruin Thanksgiving with all your with all your stuff, right? Why do you want to just come in here and try to stir up your grandma? You know this is hard for her, mm-hmm. right? So having some reasons based around timing for Thanksgiving can be helpful, first or last. I think can be really important for you and for them to sort of give a little bit of context for us. All right. And then this one, mind your P's or Q's, or better put, mind your APPs. And APP stands for ask, pick, and plan. So this little app, this is there's an app for this. So in other words, there's an app for how to talk about things. First is to ask. This is, if you want to be the one who's going to bring up issues, ask permission of the people you're going to be in conversation with to do so. It goes a long way. Maybe it's the person hosting, if they're okay with this, or checking in with the other guests that are there too, checking with them and saying, hey, there's some things I might want to talk about as we get together. You might want to tell people ahead of time, send it in a group text or send it in an email, or make a Facebook post about it if you want to be more subtle and say, we're going to talk about this. And to put a plan together. And if you're in one of those families that's comfortable with that, then say, hey, there's a couple of things I'd like to talk about, and here's what they are. And I'd love to get your input on them. So feel free to prepare ahead of time if you'd like to. That can just go an awfully long way to the conversation not turning into, why are you sabotaging this? Why do you want to bring this up? You've been saying this kind of stuff for years. That it keeps you more on track of the things that you want to talk about. The second and the first P of the APP of this little app is to pick a time. Like, maybe while you're eating and the kids are around and people are in the dining room or people are spread out, maybe that's not the time you want to talk. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not the time. Maybe it's when we're doing the dishes. Maybe it's we're going to go off to this other room while people are talking about football, and you say to people, hey, let's if you want to talk about these kinds of issues while people are out there doing that, we can go over here and we can talk about this if you want to talk about that. If anybody wants to engage in this more, I'd be glad to share with you what I know and what I've learned about this, right? So you're picking a specific time to do this, and then you plan a place. Where are you going to talk about it? All of this, just the thing it does when you ask permission, when you pick a time, when you plan a place, what it's doing is increasing your intention, right? It makes this much more intentional for the work that you want to do and the thing you want to accomplish. Not only does it communicate something to the other people that this isn't just sort of, haphazard and sort of frustration filled, but it actually causes you to think a whole lot more about it, right? What do you want to say? How much more do you want to talk about? Who are the people you'd like to have in the room? So maybe you ask somebody instead of just bringing it up openly on the table, because if it's your brother-in-law, Kevin, and you're like, Kevin, I really do, you're the one I want to talk to about this. Maybe you just say, hey, Kevin, can we go over here and talk about this? Or you think there'd be a time tonight or this afternoon when we could talk about it? All of this is just increasing your intentionality. If anxiety is the thing that's got you worked up, all of this advice so far helps to replace anxiety by having a plan. Because for a lot of people, anxiety builds when there's a lack of certainty of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And if you can just have your own plan, it may or may not go the way you wanted it to. Then you'll just live with frustration, because frustration is the difference between expectation and reality. But at least it will eliminate anxiety, because anxiety is the place between reality and possibility, right? So if you can live in this place that's not frustrated between desire and reality, but rather between what actually happened and what you hoped would happen. Sometimes frustration is just a little better than anxiety. It goes away faster.
Yeah.
Anxiety can linger for an awfully long time. So all of this advice, both walking on eggshells and dropping bombshells, is designed for relieving that anxiety and getting that off the table, metaphorically, so that so you don't have to deal with it.
Right. Reminds me a little bit of Seinfeld when they have Festivus and the airing of grievances.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually not a bad idea to just set aside a time and a place, and that's where you're gonna get into it. After dinner at 6:00 in the living room, if you want to talk politics, we're gonna do that. If you don't, you can go watch football in the other room or whatever.
Yep. And grab a glass of wine or a bourbon or a seltzer or whatever it is that you want to have in your hand, if that helps you. And let's get into it.
Right after the feats of strength, we're gonna have the airing of political differences.
I did hear about that episode. The guy who wrote that, one of the writers, this was, a extended parody of a thing that his family really did.
That's awesome.
They really did have the airing of the grievances. All right. So the last piece of advice here, is this the last piece of advice?
I think
second to last piece of advice, is stick to the recipe. So here's the thing. When you dig in on an issue, try to avoid fact-checking others and repeating all the typical kinds of points. Talk about why this matters to you. And if you're engaging with someone else, ask them why it matters to them. One of the pieces of advice that we gave in our Confronting Christian Nationalism training about all of these kinds of issues when you're talking to someone who differs from you is that there's 3 really great questions of inquiry of a person who differs from you on a topic that matters to you. One is asking them, what do they believe? So you really hear from them what it is that they're holding to, and not assuming that you know where someone is on a topic because of the ways you've heard other people describe that topic. Right. So it's very easy for you to think, hey, if you support these political candidates, Republicans or Democrats or Green Party, then it's easier for you to assume that you know why someone supports them. And you're assuming upon that belief what it is that they hold to. It's good to check that, because a lot of people hold a belief that doesn't look identical to other people who hold a very similar belief. So the first thing you want to do is check, what is it that you actually think?
Mm-hmm.
And for yourself as well, like, to be very clear, here is what I think about this issue. Really, really important. And the second question of inquiry is the why question. Why do you believe that? Where did this come from? What informed that? What's the date? Now, those are really important. Most people can kind of answer those. Again, if you ask someone to go on a little bit longer, like if you do the therapist approach where you sort of lean back and say, say more about that. At some point, they're out of stuff to say about it, right? Why do you believe this about regulations? Or why do you believe this about, fracking? And they'll say, well, and then you say, oh yes, say more. Well, no, that's it.
That's all I got.
Yeah. That's what so right. That's sufficient. People run out of that at some point, but it's good to listen to it and to make sure you know the reasons why people believe that and where their information is coming from can all be super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But the third question, this is the real big one. This is the real empathy-based one. It is, what does that belief do for you? How does that belief function in your life? Like, what does it give you? By holding that belief, what exists in your sense of yourself or your understanding of the world? What you'll find for most people is that their beliefs help them understand themselves as the hero. Maybe the victim, because we have this framework in the United States and around the world, actually, but it's played out particularly in the United States, that people are in one of 3 categories: a hero, a villain, or a victim. And rarely do we put ourselves in the role of the villain. So most people's belief system is designed to help them explain why they're a victim or why they're the hero. And once you understand how a belief makes a person feel like they're a good person who's done the right thing, and is either acknowledged for that heroically or is not acknowledged for that and has been taken advantage of, that's the key to it all. Recognizing this is just true for people. We all tend to do it. We'll find ourselves a hero victim narrative. So once you're talking to somebody about, hey, what is it that you think? What is it you believe? How is it that you function in the world? And then you say, what does that do for you? And listen carefully as to how it is that that helps the person see themselves as a good person, doing the right thing and accomplishing a lot in the world. It's really super key. So when you get into talking with someone about the, and first of all, check that with yourself too, right? Like not with others, because chances are when you start talking about the things you believe, it also reflects on how you see yourself as a good person, right? That you've taken on an important cause, that you've stood up for someone who needs to be protected, that you've learned about an issue that other people don't know, or that you've talked about your own vulnerabilities. So if you're talking about, healthcare and why Republicans want to get rid of subsidized support of the ACA, and you're like, well, let me tell you about why this matters, because there's no way we could have had this baby, or there's no way that I could have had this operation, or this person would have gone bankrupt. All of that really starts to frame up into how it keeps people from being hurt or harmed, or how it makes somebody a hero. What you want to be careful of is not to communicate your ideas that just points out that somebody else is the villain. Because when you attribute to someone else a role, hero, villain, or victim, that they don't see themselves as, then you're like the director of the play arguing with the actors about what your role is here. And you're never the director in somebody else's life. You're only a character.
Yeah.
They're the director that decides what their character's role is in this play of life. So you always have to think about, how does their position make it possible for them to see themselves as the hero, and how does mine make me see myself as the hero or as the victim?
Oliver has a great point. It's important. Don't demean the other side with labels. Resist calling them racist, socialist, whatever, making them the villain. It's a great point, great thing to remember.
I mean, you can come just flat out and say like, hey, I know, that it's, you hear a lot of people saying that you're okay, then fill in the blank. So if you happen to be somebody that's conservative and a Republican, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to go talk to, a bunch of liberals, instead of saying to them, well, how is it this makes you some sort of an anti-American, godless, socialist commie, right? These titles that someone doesn't want. And say, how is it that helps you feel like you're really fulfilling what it means to be an American? Because they will tell you, they have worked out how it is that this really taps into what it means to be an American, or what it means to be a Christian, or what it means to be a honorable person, or a full humanist, or whatever their orientation is. They will answer the question in a way that puts them in the hero slot. For you to know that and understand that for yourself and for someone else. And so when you're having a debate with someone about, a chosen debate where they're willing to exchange ideas with you, instead of you thinking, I'm going to share my position and that's going to show how I'm the hero and how you're the villain, rather is to say, you're going to show how you're the hero, knowing that they're also going to see themselves as the hero. Because what we ultimately need to do is to get rid of the hero, villain, victim archetype altogether. And there's a second archetype, which doesn't have those three in it: hero, villain, victim. And it's the common sojourner, the people that are moving through life together, that we're all trying to figure this out. And we all do things that seem really great. We all do things that harm each other. We all have positions and ideas that take from some and give to others. And we're trying to figure this out collectively together, instead of, I'm a hero, you're a villain, and you're going to make a victim out of people if I don't stop you. That story, that's going to get us nowhere. It's not even accurate. It's certainly not reflective of what's really going on, and it just doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah, I think that sojourner narrative is so helpful. And we used this bit from Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove in our training sessions over the tour the last few months, where he talks about people in their own ecosystem. They're doing what makes sense to them given the information that they've been given. And a lot of people, right and left, live in an ecosystem where it's closed off from a lot of different ideas, and they're doing the best they can with the information in front of them. And so we have to think and hold some grace for people like that, and also, kindly pop those bubbles if we can. So
yeah, and look, and to say to people from my vantage point, this doesn't seem like you're fulfilling that thing you want to fulfill. There's a whole lot of other stuff we do in this training about different view orientations that people have about where authority comes from, different parent figures about how they view the government and society. Some view the government as a nurturing parent. Some view the government as a strict father. These kinds of deep-rooted narratives about how people view the world. There's a lot of ways to deepen your own understanding of what could be going on in the background of someone's own thinking about how the world is structured. But however it goes, they see themselves as doing the right thing. Like I watch a lot of politics on television and podcasts and internet and stuff. So I hear from many sides and many perspectives on this. It's shocking how many sides want to describe of someone that they hate America. I mean, I hear it all the time from people who tell me, oh, because you're a Democrat, you hate America. And I watch a lot of people who believe the way I do say to Republicans and conservatives and MAGA people, you hate America. You hate women. Now, most of these people would not agree with that assertion. I don't hate America, right? My wanting to rein in unbridled capitalism is not because I hate America. My wanting to bring up the fact that the United States of America has participated in all sorts of destructive activities is not because I hate America. It's because I love America. Mm-hmm. That's how I view it. But other people see me as hating it, and likewise on the other side.
Yeah, this kind of gets at Ray's question of how do you deal with family that sees you, a Democrat, as evil? Like, how do you, they've brought some assumptions to the table and then lumped you into
totally
their villain narrative.
One of the ways to do that is to say, hey, I was listening to this podcast or read this thing and they talked about heroes, villains, and victims. And it's really easy for us to all see ourselves as the hero and those we disagree with as the villain. Right? Once you name that, and now you're telling me that I'm the villain, right? And then to say, I'm going to try not to do that. And I think it would be great if you didn't do that to me either, right? I love America, or I want the best for this world, or I want the planet to thrive, right? Whatever it is that is the thing that motivates you around the topic that you're talking about. Like, you might actually think, look, I think certain industries are really harmful and they should be shut down. Right. You might think petroleum industries, you might think the pharmaceutical industry, you might think global warming based industries, you might think the tobacco industries should all be like done away with. Well, it's possible to say that view and not say, and anyone who disagrees with me is a villain that needs to be vanquished, right? Rather is to say, but I know other people see those industries as really heroic because of the jobs that they provide, or because of the history that they've had, or because of the product that people that they produce that people benefit from. So I can see how you see yourself as a hero, but let me share with you this, right? That's the kind of engagement that you can really find some accomplishment in.
Yeah.
And the third piece of advice to play off this cooking theme is to set your oven timer, right? You don't want to overcook the dressing or the turkey or the sweet potatoes. What you want to do is have the right amount of heat for the right amount of time. So figure out in your conversation, what do you want out of this? Because at some point, it's just gone on long enough, right? It's been in the heat too long. Either the heat was too high and you need to turn the heat down a little, or it's just been in there too long. And you might not be using a sous vide where you can leave the meat cooking in the bag inside the water, at 142 degrees to get that perfect piece of meat. By the way, Dan, have you ever used a sous vide? You know what I'm talking about?
No, but I love the idea and the things that other people have made for me with it.
Boy, it's just confusing as all get out. You use this baggie, like a Ziploc, and you put your meat or fish or potatoes or whatever in there, and then you have a wand that goes inside of a pot, and the wand heats the water to exactly the right temperature so that inside that baggie, it's not boiling, it's coming to, 126 degrees, which will give you medium rare, or 138 degrees, 141 degrees. You can set it to exact. So the thing can just sit there at that temperature for hours and never gets any more cooked.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. This is how a lot of restaurants, and then and then you can just sear it. It's a piece of meat. Unbelievable. So you want the right amount of heat for the right amount of time. If you can find that right heat, you can keep the conversation going. But at some point, you have to decide, what do you want from this? Let me give you one more metaphor to mix another metaphor here. Decide if you want someone to take an off-ramp or an on-ramp. If you're going to be in a discussion with someone and you're going to provide a contrary idea to the idea that they hold, because you decided you want to get into this, decide what you're looking for. Do you want them to leave an idea, or do you want them to take on a new idea? Off ramps or on ramps? Think about, as you're driving over there and you're like, oh, we're now going to go from the side road and we're going to now get onto the freeway. It's an on ramp. Is your idea something you want to bring someone to a new concept, or do you want to help someone take exit 22B to get off of the road that they're on? If you don't know what you want, or if your idea really is what you really want to do is just express your opinion, you don't actually care what happens to the hearer, to the recipient of your ideas, that's a different project. If it's just, hey, I'm going to say my truth, I don't give a rat's ass what any of the rest of you think about all this stuff, I'm just going to say it. Or if you're saying, hey, I've just got something to say and I'm not particularly concerned, I'm not attached to you believing it or thinking about it or anything like, so either because you're angry about it, you're just going to say it, or because you're like, look, I'm totally non-detached, I just want you to know what I think and leave it at that, then that's an option. But most of us are communicating an idea because we want that idea to impact the other person. So do you want them to take it on, an on-ramp? Do you want them to let go of something as an off-ramp? And only when you know that will you feel full enough from the meal, like checking your stomach as you eat, to know, okay, we've been at this long enough.
Right. They're not taking the off-ramp. Nothing I say is going to get them to, let's call it a day.
Yep. And then you can always leave it with, can I send you an article about this? Can I send you a podcast about this? Can I share with you something later? Thanks for talking about this. Can we pick it up? Can we pick it up down the road?
Yeah.
And then always end with this. This is a great reporter phrase that I hear from almost all reporters now. It must be a new journalism school. Is there anything else that I should know that we haven't talked about? That's a killer question for people, especially in a disagreement, debate, kind of, I view it this way, you view it that way. Once you're done, you've done your thing, you've said your stuff, then you say to them, is there anything else I should know from your perspective? Oh man, first of all, it's really helpful because it leaves that gap where people can fill it in. But also it just communicates to the person that you were open to hearing what they had to say. It really does go a long way. And sometimes that little gem right there, it's going to tell you as much about the person and why this matters to them as any other question that you'll ask. Is there anything else that I should know? Do you want to take some leftovers home? In other words, we should add that to this article. You want a little baggie to take home with you? Who's going to take the pink stuff home with them?
Yeah, that's good.
So anyway, those are my pieces of advice on this.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I think it's good to, all this is kind of rehearsing ahead of time what you might say when contentious things come up. And I think that's really helpful rather than shooting from the hip when someone's got you riled up and mad and then you say something that maybe isn't helpful and then it escalates. Yeah.
Yeah. And also look, making a passing comment, not the greatest communication tool.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. I've tried to curate it over time. A quick, sassy little...
Yeah, snark and sarcasm might not be the best. It might feel good when you're saying that zinger.
It's pumpkin pie, though. It's the little bit at the end. That's the thing. It's not that you can't, just don't don't fill the plate with that stuff, because
Right.
that is, you know, if you follow up with, hey, and I'd be glad to talk with you about that a little bit more if you want to, but it often doesn't go well.
Yeah. And I think too, it's important. You might not convince the person that you're debating with to take the on ramp or the off ramp, but a lot of times there's people in the room listening to your conversation that are on the fence and that maybe have been looking for an off ramp for a long time, and just to hear someone on the other side of the political spectrum articulating a different point of view can be really helpful for the innocent bystanders as well.
Yeah, that is great advice. Absolutely. For a lot of people benefit from watching other conversations happen. That's why people listen to podcasts and all that, right? They're not in a one-on-one conversation. They're observing something, and we learn an awful lot and open ourselves to an awful lot by observing the happenings between others. It's so important. Hey, and also, if you take this on-ramp, off-ramp thing, when you're driving, it's really a good idea to not wait until you're within 300 feet of an exit to say to somebody, turn here. Right? You might want to say, hey, in 3 miles, you're going to take this, you're going to take this ramp. And then you remind somebody in another mile, kind of like the way your map does it, where it says, stay on this for 98 miles, and then, and then in 2 miles, and then in a mile, and then a few hundred feet. In other words, this conversation you're having with somebody, this might be the first time they've heard there's an off-ramp coming at 22B.
Yeah.
So giving them a little bit of time to get there. You don't want to be in any conversation where someone just goes, oh my gosh, we should probably stop fracking. Or, I guess we probably should reconsider how we're going to help, former coal miners find jobs, and maybe we should put them on government pay if they're in. Maybe we pick certain industries that people don't just get a livable wage, but they get government funded pay for 2 years to help them transition to something else, an extended version of unemployment for certain industries that we know are going to, like, if you want to bring that, and for someone to just be like, wow, hey, could I have another piece of pie? And that's, I hadn't thought about that ever. I think no one does that, right? I mean, you didn't come to any conclusion you hold because someone said a sentence, right? If you did, it's probably not going to last,
Yeah, that wasn't a deeply held belief to begin with.
Yeah. Someone else is going to have a sentence for you, and that's going to go.
And we also talk a lot, we talk a lot in our work about when people are leaving a harmful idea, is there a community or people willing to receive them? And I hear this a lot from Republican friends, is like, I don't think these Democrats even like me. Like, they don't. And so how do we change that narrative of being, if you're on the Democrat side, leaning left, whatever, how do you offer a welcoming on-ramp to new ideas rather than just, you're wrong, you're horrible, stop being that way?
Yes. And look, check yourself. If you're exchanging an idea with someone that you really don't like, that's pretty apparent to them.
Yeah.
Right. Which is different than sharing an idea with someone you really do like, because you really want the best for them, and you're not just frustrated by their existence and by the fact that they, live in your world with you, and you kind of wish that they didn't, and what they're saying bothers you. So that commitment to, do you like me or not, goes a really long way. And if it is, you're talking with someone you don't like, I have to do that quite often. I don't want enemies, but I just don't prefer everybody. And sometimes when you're talking to people you don't really have an affinity to, or don't feel real great about, or you just don't care, whatever, like, you can't control how much you care. Like, you care about, it's that line from Larry David from Curb Your Enthusiasm, where a person around him said, you're winning some award for humanitarian work. You don't even like people. And he goes, well, I like humans. I just don't really like any individual people, but I like humanity.
I like the idea of people.
Like the collective. I mean, I want to help humans, but any person just kind of, really bugs me. It can be easy to feel like hey, I'm now going to use this other idea, this thing, because I just want to win over the person that I don't like. That's really important. Like, you're better off just not having any
Right.
conversation about things meaningful. That's why there's football, is for those relationships, right? That's that.
Yeah, Ray
This
says,
is
find something in common, like the Cowboys suck, right?
exactly. This is why we have, in mimemic theory, this is why we have alternatives to, to
Organized
some sort of
violence.
organized violence and war. Yeah, is because it's way better to just argue about the football team.
Yep.
And by the way, this Thanksgiving, if you're into this, the team that's owned by people not living in Minneapolis or Minnesota, but are the Minnesota Vikings, are playing.
Yeah.
So the Vikings are playing. I don't know what makes a team owned by a state. I guess it's the name and the location where they play half their games. I guess that's it, because it's not owned by people here. The people on the team don't live here. I mean, they're just a bunch of out of towners that come in. It's like
Jerry Seinfeld, we're cheering for laundry.
Is that a line?
He's got a bit, yeah, about we're just cheering for laundry.
Oh, I love that.
Just the right color.
So anyway,
jersey.
the Minnesota Vikings are playing on Thursday, and I only found that out because I was getting my hair cut and having to have that awkward conversation with the nice person at Great Clips. And in the 6 minutes it takes to get my hair cut, it's not going to be silent. I promise you that. We're going to talk about something. And so, of course, this was, hey, Thursday's Thanksgiving. What are you doing for Thanksgiving? And
yep.
I said, well, arguing with my family. And then they said, she said, oh, we just got a 75-inch television, and we're having people over to watch the game and the Vikings. And so I heard all about the Vikings playing. So
nice. What I like to do, because I like football, I don't follow it very closely. But I like to learn like one obscure fact about a player that I know will be playing, and then just drop that casually while everybody's hanging out watching the game, and people are like, "Oh yeah, he is having a good season." And then you just disappear into the background.
Yeah, your little contribution, and then you just pull right back out. Hey, that should have been another one of our tips. Hey, the other thing you want to do, friends, you want to pull up a fancy graph of an idea that you have, you want to argue about, and show people on your phone, like, look, it's right there. Do you know how to read a graph?
Yeah.
Can you? I mean, you're in the middle of an argument and you pull it out and just like show a graph. Like, no,
you've won. That'll do it.
Just walk off. Can I get you some pie? Because I just showed you a pie chart. See that pie chart?
Made me hungry.
All right. Well, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I don't think we're doing another one of these. We have some podcasts that were done on while we were on the road that might show up in the podcast feed. So if you're in the podcast feed only, or if you've never checked the podcast feed because you only watch this on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch, and is Twitter still around? Did Elon Musk shut that down yet?
It's been gone, I think, as far as.
No. But we didn't even get to the fact that Donald Trump's been invited back onto
we didn't
onto
get
Twitter.
to a lot, yeah.
Good Lord.
Are we doing politics tomorrow, or are we not?
Oh yeah, we probably are. Yeah. Okay. So maybe we're back tomorrow, and then maybe over the weekend we'll throw up some other interviews that went on from some other podcasts. Our Vote Common Good people were on other podcasts, so we might just pull those and put those in our feed.
Yeah, you
can do that, right? Is that a rule? Does anybody know what the rule is on that? Can you take another podcast and just say
feels wrong, but we'll find out.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't feel wrong to me.
Get permission.
Nothing feels wrong to me anymore. I'm just look. If you can just take the documents, if you can just overrun the Capitol, and there's not really a problem there, let's just reshare a podcast inside of our own stream. That'd be great if we got a copyright violation from a podcast that I was on. What? That'd be great. Somebody that invites me on a podcast, I'm like, we replayed it on ours, and they're like, shut it down. Take that thing off there.
Like, look, it's not like these were nuclear secrets that I took to my personal residence. But
I don't know anything about the love life of the French president. Nothing. How can that be a problem? All right. Is that good for today? Well, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And, give the bird a chance this weekend.
All right.